Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
It began with a ping, then another, and another. At first I thought my phone was glitching, lighting up like that. But no, it was messages, pouring in one after the other. Names I hadn't seen on my screen in years. Cousins I barely remembered. Distant family members whose lives had spun away from mine decades ago. And suddenly, they were back. The funny thing is, I should have been happy. Family reaching out, reconnecting after all this time, it should have felt warm. But instead, all I felt was dread, because I already knew why they were contacting me. Somewhere, somehow, someone had told them that I had money. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that people act very differently once they think you have something they want. I come from a big family. My dad had 6 sisters, and each of them had children. I grew up surrounded by cousins too many to count, really. But life does what it always does. People drift apart, move away, build their own lives. And for me, there had been almost no contact for more than 20 years. The only times I'd seen any of them was at funerals, when grief briefly pulled us into the same room before spitting us back out into our separate worlds again. There were no phone calls on holidays, no surprise visits, no thinking of you cards in the mail. We weren't part of each other's lives anymore. So when the messages came, it wasn't about family. It wasn't about missing me. It was about money. Some were blunt, their words laced with anger before they even bothered to ask. One cousin ranted at me through paragraph after paragraph about how unfair it was that I hadn't told anyone, how I should have shared with the family, how I was selfish for keeping it to myself. I let her go on, typing her outrage into my screen, until she finally paused. And then, maybe a little more sharply than I intended, I asked her, "Are you done? Because if you are, maybe I can explain." I didn't want to repeat myself a dozen times, so I created a group chat. I wrote the whole story out there, everything that had happened to me, all the betrayals I had lived through, the way I had lost trust in people over and over again. I ended my message in bold, underlined, massive letters. "This is why I never told you." There was silence at first, then a trickle of shocked responses. A few cousins said they couldn't believe what I'd been through, that they had no idea. But when I asked them point blank why they were so upset that I hadn't told them, none of them had a real answer. Not until I said what we were all thinking, "Maybe because you wanted to benefit from it?" That hit a nerve. "No way! How could you think that of us?" came the replies, rapid-fire denials, trying to erase what we both knew was true. I told them plainly, "Because of everything I've been through, because of all the crap that has hit my fan, I've lost a lot of trust in people in general." And it was true. After enough times being lied to, manipulated, and taken advantage of, you stop giving the benefit of the doubt so easily. And right on cue, the requests started coming. Some cousins asked if they could get money, not borrow, not a loan, just outright get it. Others were a little more careful, saying they'd like to borrow some, if possible. But the entitlement in their tone was unmistakable. It wasn't, "Could we talk about this?" or "I'm in a hard spot." It was, "You have it. I want it. Why haven't you given it to me yet?" By that point, I wasn't even angry, just tired. Tired of being expected to carry other people. Tired of watching greed strip away any sense of family. So I uploaded a document, something my cousin and I had signed in the past when I had loaned him money. The document had rules. Real, legal rules. I told them all. If they wanted money, they could read the document and agree to those rules. If not, the answer was no. The group chat went quiet after that. Quiet, but not gone, because I had a feeling it wasn't over yet. And I was right. A few days later, one cousin asked me to call him. Something in his tone was different, not greedy, not demanding. Hesitant. I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick up, but I did. And that phone call changed everything. When I saw the message from one of my cousins asking me to call him, my first instinct was to ignore it. After all the shouting and the begging and the thinly veiled entitlement in that group chat, I didn't expect anything good to come from a phone call. But something in the way he wrote it gave me pause. It wasn't angry or demanding. It was quiet, almost pleading. So I called. The first few seconds were awkward, both of us unsure how to start. And then his voice cracked. He told me about his daughter, how she was sick, terribly sick, with a condition that I won't name here, but one that could end her life without treatment. She was in her early 20s, far too young to be fighting battles like this. He told me that there was a treatment available in the United States, a slim chance, but still a chance, and that without it, she wouldn't live. The problem was, insurance wouldn't cover it. The cost was astronomical. I didn't trust him right away. How could I? After everything that had already happened, after all the begging and lies I'd heard before, I wasn't about to take his word at face value. So I asked for details. I asked questions I knew would make him uncomfortable: doctors' names, medical fields, hospital contacts. He didn't hesitate. He told me everything, and then he asked me, almost in a whisper, if I could come see her for myself. That was the moment I knew he wasn't lying. Because liars don't invite you to verify. Liars hide. But he wanted me to come, so I did. Walking into that hospital room was like stepping into another world. I'd braced myself for exaggeration, for a half-truth blown out of proportion. What I found was reality in its rawest form. She lay there, pale and frail, tubes and monitors surrounding her like a cage. Her books were stacked on the bed beside her. Homework she was still trying to do, even though she looked like she didn't have the strength to lift her head. It was surreal, this girl, barely out of adolescence, still fighting to be a student while also fighting for her life. I swear, in that room, you could almost see death standing just over her shoulder, waiting. She smiled when I walked in. A small, tired smile, but real. We talked for a while, about nothing and everything: her classes, her friends, the dreams she still clung to even though time felt like it was slipping away from her. Her resilience shook me. Then her doctor came in. He explained the situation, the treatment, the odds. Later, I went with him to his office, and he laid out the details in a way that left no room for doubt. This wasn't a scam. This wasn't some exaggerated plea. It was life and death. When I got home, I didn't just take his word for it. I verified his name, his credentials, his field. Everything checked out. Every piece of the puzzle fit. Later, my cousin and I spoke again on the phone. He was calmer this time, but I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. I asked him a simple question. Was the money only for medical costs? He said yes. His wife, my cousin-in-law, would accompany their daughter to the U.S. and stay with her through treatment. They had just enough to cover her travel and living expenses. What they didn't have was the money for the treatment itself. That's all they were asking for. Nothing more. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. My husband sat across from me, waiting. We didn't even need to say much. We both knew what we had to do. Yes, I had been lied to before. Yes, I had been used and betrayed. But this was different. This was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt myself wanting to help. That night after the hospital visit, I sat at the kitchen table with my husband. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud. All I could see was her face, my cousin's daughter, fighting so hard to stay alive, homework books scattered on the bed as if she were still trying to keep life normal while machines kept her tethered to the world. It gnawed at me. I looked at my husband and said, "If we help, it has to be different this time." He nodded. He knew exactly what I meant. We had both lived through enough lies, enough sob stories that turned out to be cons. My trust in people had been burned down to ash, and if we were going to do this, I needed to build walls to protect myself from being hurt again. We talked for hours. We weighed the risks, the what-ifs, the long-term consequences. Helping her meant a massive financial commitment, but not helping her meant walking away, knowing I might have let someone die when I had the power to intervene. I couldn't live with that. My husband couldn't either. But there had to be rules. Clear, strict, undeniable rules. The first was obvious. We would only pay the exact amount that the U.S. hospital quoted for the treatment. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. We weren't handing over a lump sum of cash to be spent however they pleased. We would transfer the money directly to the hospital to ensure it went exactly where it needed to go. Second, no hidden costs, no surprise extra expenses. They told me they already had enough for travel and living costs for the mother, while she stayed with her daughter in the U.S. If they came back later asking for more, the answer would be no. This was strictly about the medical treatment. Third, accountability. My lawyer friend, L, agreed to draw up a contract, and then just to make absolutely sure we had another lawyer, one specialized in the medical field, review it. The contract was airtight. It spelled out the conditions clearly, where the money would go, what it was for, and what would happen in case of success or failure. And then we added one final condition. It wasn't about repayment, because we knew they couldn't repay us. It wasn't about collateral, because there was nothing they could offer that equaled the value of what we were giving. Instead, we asked for something symbolic, something meaningful. If the treatment worked, and even if it didn't, they would commit a certain amount of money over time to medical research for that illness, in installments if necessary. It wasn't about us getting something back, it was about paying it forward, about ensuring that the fight didn't end with their daughter, that some good would ripple outward no matter what happened. When the contract was finished, I sat back and felt something I hadn't felt in years. A little bit of peace. Not complete, not perfect, but enough. The next step was telling them. I called my cousin again, and this time I asked him to put his wife on speakerphone. When she answered, I explained everything. I told them how thoroughly I had checked the situation. I told them how deeply I had been burned in the past, how little trust I had left in people, and how grateful I was for their honesty. I told them that my husband and I had decided to help, but only under the rules I was about to lay out. I could hear their breath catch as I spoke. And when I finally told them the news that we would cover the medical treatment under the strict conditions, we were met with nothing but tears and broken words of gratitude. Thank you, over and over, through sobs. I sat there listening, equal parts relieved and terrified. Then I sent them the draft of the contract. I told them I wanted their lawyer, or even the hospital's lawyer, to review it. I didn't want them signing anything without understanding every word. If they agreed, we would sign it together. For the first time since those cousins had stormed into my life with grabby hands and greedy demands, I felt like maybe this time would be different. But I still wasn't sure. A few days after sending the draft of the contract, I got a phone call I wasn't expecting. It wasn't from my cousin or his wife. It was from their daughter. Her voice was softer than I imagined. Fragile, but determined. She thanked me before I could even get a word in. Over and over, thank you, thank you. I had to steady myself, because hearing her voice made everything suddenly more real. It wasn't just numbers on paper or a sob story I had to guard myself against. It was a young woman, fighting for her life, clinging to a hope that wouldn't exist without us. I asked her how she was feeling. She laughed, a brittle laugh, and said something I'll never forget. Better than I should, worse than I want. I could hear the truth in that sentence. She was exhausted, but she refused to give up. She told me about the little things she tried to hold on to, the books she still kept near her bed, the music she listened to when the nights were too long, the way she tried to keep up with her studies despite being tethered to machines. She said she wanted to live long enough to finish her degree. It's such a stupid thing, she admitted, but I just want to graduate. It wasn't stupid. Not at all. It was human. We talked for nearly an hour. She asked about me, about my husband, about why I decided to help her. I didn't sugarcoat my answer. I told her about the betrayals, the lies, the cousins who only saw me as a bank with legs. I told her how badly I had lost my trust in people, and how different it felt to see her, to speak to her, to know that for once, maybe, the need was genuine. She cried when I told her that, not out of pity, but out of recognition. She said, I don't want your money to be wasted. I want to be the one who proves you right, that people can still be worth helping. That broke me. I hadn't realized how tightly I was holding on to my cynicism until she said those words. For years, I had walked around with my guard up, assuming the worst in everyone who came close to me. And here she was, this young woman clinging to life, promising me she wouldn't let me down not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Later, her doctor called me. He was professional, clear, and compassionate. He explained the treatment, the risks, the slim chances. He didn't promise miracles. He didn't dress it up. But he did say that without this treatment, she had no real chance at all. With it, well, there was a glimmer. And sometimes, a glimmer is all you need. After that call, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the contract I had sent to my cousin. For the first time, the rules I had set didn't feel like just barriers to protect me. They felt like something more, a structure of hope, a way to make sure this chance wasn't squandered. That night, my husband asked me how I was holding up. I told him the truth. I'm scared, not of losing the money, of losing her, because by then, it wasn't about cousins or contracts or greedy hands. It was about her voice, her laugh, her stubbornness to still do homework even as death hovered over her shoulder. It was about the girl who wanted to live enough to call a distant cousin she had never really known, just to say thank you. And I realized I wanted her to live too. When the contract finally came back signed, I held the paper in my hands, longer than I should have. My lawyer friend had prepared it. Another lawyer specializing in medical law had reviewed it. And still, part of me thought, what if they run off? What if this is just another elaborate play, but with better acting than the rest? But then I remembered her voice, that fragile strength in the hospital bed, telling me she wanted to graduate. That wasn't something you could fake. That was real. We arranged it so that the hospital in the U.S. would receive the payments directly. No money would ever touch my cousin's hands. That was the line I refused to cross. It wasn't about trust anymore. It was about control. Control that I had to maintain if I wanted to sleep at night. The day we made the first transfer, I received another call from her. She was crying again, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was relief. She said she finally felt like she could breathe, that hope didn't feel like a fantasy anymore. Her mother came on the line too, thanking me with a voice so broken I almost couldn't understand her words. I didn't say much. I just told them, make this count. Every cent is for her life. Meanwhile, the rest of my extended family caught wind of what I had done. And, predictably, the greedy hands started waving again. Some of them called me selfish. Yes, selfish for not helping them with their struggles. One cousin even had the audacity to suggest that I should have spread the money evenly among all of them, as though life-saving treatment for a dying girl was on the same level as paying off their credit card debt. I didn't bother arguing. I simply gave them the number of my investment advisor, wished them luck, and then blocked them one by one. I felt lighter with every block. But the hardest moment came later. When the doctor in the U.S. emailed me with the treatment schedule, I realized just how real this had become. Flights were booked. A hospital room was prepared. Specialists were lined up. I stared at that email, knowing that money, my money, was going to move mountains for someone. And I prayed it would be enough. In the weeks that followed, communication became more regular. Updates from the hospital, messages from my cousin and his wife, even small notes from their daughter, telling me about the nurses, about how different the American hospital felt compared to home. She told me about the food, about how one nurse smuggled in a milkshake for her because she had been craving one for weeks. It wasn't just medical updates. It was life. Life beginning to breathe again in someone who had nearly lost it. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't terrified. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. Was this going to be the call? The one where they told me it hadn't worked? Where the glimmer had gone out? One evening, I got a long message from my cousin. He admitted something I never expected. He told me that before all this, he had resented me. That when he heard I had money, His first thought wasn't noble, it was envy. But then, seeing his daughter nearly fade away, he realized how ridiculous that envy was. He wrote, "I don't care if you're rich or poor. I just care that you gave my daughter a chance to fight. That makes you more family than anyone else." I read those words over and over again, and I cried. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like just a target for greedy hands. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had done something that mattered. The outcome of her treatment, I don't know yet. It's still early, and the doctors are cautious. But here's what I do know. I stopped letting the bitterness of betrayal own me. I took a risk, a terrifying risk, and I chose to believe in one person when the rest had proven unworthy of belief. And when I close my eyes at night, I no longer see the greedy cousins with their hands outstretched. I see her, lying in that hospital bed, whispering that she just wanted to graduate. And I think if she makes it to graduation, then every single battle I fought to protect myself will have been worth it.